Writers, readers, drinkers, lend me your ears and your livers. Welcome to Writers Drinking Whiskey Open Bar, your friendly neighborhood watering hole and boozy author panel, where the drinks are cold and the writing advice is always hot, hot. I am your host and Sam Mayday Malone for this evening, William R. Hincy, and joining me, we have a cast of rival Norm and Woody and Carla and all the rest at Cheers. John Gilstrap, Matthew Kaye, gentlemen, welcome to the bar.
It's nice to be here. You set a high bar, so all we have to do is get drunk.
That's right.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Right. Cheers. It needs to be. What we have to do at some point on the show is when people enter, it's just like Norm, right? It's like, John.
Yeah.
I'll work on a sound effect, for that. So in the tradition of the show, I like to have a little fun with introductions. I will include, full bios down here for anyone watching on the YouTube. Both have great credentials, so definitely check those out. But what I like to do for introductions is maybe we can just go around the group here. You can, say your name, your current book or current project, if there's a project you're working on you'd like to talk about. And then tell us what's the worst piece of advice you've ever received. Can be writing or otherwise. So maybe, Matt, we start with you and then we'll cruise over to John.
Yeah. Right now, I just finished a upper middle grade adventure novel, my first of the sort. It's called On the Lam. It takes place in 1955 rural Indiana, about a young girl and her brother who are hunting for this fugitive to get some reward money or any information, and things get a little more complicated than they originally thought, which is something we'll probably talk about later on. But so that's been really fun. I've loved writing from Maisie's point of view. It's been really a pleasure. I love writing first person, and this has been just a blast. And it's also fun to kind of ask my mom a bunch of questions, kind of base the character on my mom and being around that age. All these cool family photos that like burned into my head that were up above the mantle and stuff. And I think that became the story. So worst piece of advice. Oh my God, there's so many. And they are different like parts of life, right? Between dating. And I did have my friend, I will say this one because it's humorous. I had just started dating my now wife, and we had been out on one date, and I had sent her a text and she hadn't answered. And now that I'm married to her, I know that she takes forever to answer texts and emails. So that's fine. But I remember going to my friend's house and he said, "How's it going with Christine?" And I said, "It's going well. I sent a text this morning and I haven't heard back," but I wasn't really concerned, but I was maybe like a 3 out of 10, And my friend goes, "You know what you should do right now? Just text her all caps. Do you like me or what? Why are we wasting our time with this? Let's just find out right away." And I was like, to this day, I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't take his advice, because that probably would have spooked her so badly. Knowing her now, I would not be married. So it really shows you, like, maybe don't ask, when you ask certain people for advice, just take it with a grain of salt. Maybe just sit on it for, 48 hours. And I don't think all
Give
caps
that some thought.
Yeah. 48 hours is usually pretty good. And maybe all caps is always bad. It's always bad. Yeah.
I was thinking that same thing. And 13, how old is my son? 13. So in going on 14 years of marriage, I've never texted my wife all caps. And I think that's the secret of a happy marriage. I think that's why we're still together.
Yeah.
Very good. Awesome, John.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Especially when it's, "Do you like me?" There's something that's sort of inherently desperate about that.
It was so desperate.
Yeah.
I think she was coming off of a rough situation, and he channeled it through me. And I was like, "Oh, I'm not feeling this. We went on a hike yesterday. Let's calm down."
Right. We learned that in third grade. It was like, check yes or no or maybe or whatever.
Yeah.
In terms of books, I am squarely between books. I'm equidistant between books. So Harm's Way, I think it's the 15th of the Jonathan Grave thrillers, came out in August. The next one comes out in August. And now I'm actually completely lost my way, actually, in the middle of the first book of a new series that's based on, it will be called Burned Bridges, I think. That's the working title. And it's actually based, it surrounds It features Irene Rivers, who is the FBI director in the Grave books. And I've spun her out in a new series, and I have set her. She's left the FBI after she kind of burns down her job in Zero Sum, which is the book that comes out in August. And without giving away too many of the plot points there, so she's gone away from the FBI, and she started this new life that isn't going at all as she had planned it to be. So that one will be. I have to finish it sometime in July. Actually, not sometime in July, on July 15th. And I have no idea if I will. Yes, I will get there because I always finish on the deadlines. I'm not sure how. But I would tell you it's always that way. It is. I've never been a month away from a book and had any idea how I'm going to finish it. So certain things you depend on.
That's part of your process.
It's the panic response, right? And the worst advice ever is anything that starts with "you have to." You have to outline. You have to, or you can't. You can't start with the weather. You can't have a prologue. You can't have, because there are no rules. And if this is a creative endeavor, and anybody who tells you you have to do this or you cannot do that, they are wrong. Just flat out wrong. There are good suggestions. There's always, when the cliches exist for a reason, but
sure.
I think every writer early in their career gets wrapped around the axle about this kind of thing, and they really shouldn't. And you people who have been married for like 13 years, I'm coming up on 42, so y'all are rookies.
Okay, very good. That's the biggest accomplishment right there.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by life every year.
To stick around me for that long. Yeah,
that's some of the best advice I've heard, actually, is just to kind of get rid of all those very intense, you can't statements. That's actually very good advice.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually far more free, and suggestions is a nice word for it, John.
Yeah.
Well, you're a teacher, right? That's why.
I am.
So you have to guide students through that, because they've gone through years and years of hearing that. And the interwebs have lots of dogmatic advice on what can and cannot be done that's spewed by people who have never done anything.
You're absolutely right.
Sure. Yeah. Amen.
I had a student that was like terrified of starting a sentence with "and" once. He thought like if he did it, his father was going to come in and like take the car for a month. It was like the fear was in his eyes. And I was like, no, this is done a lot. And he goes, really? I said, yes. The fact that you've never been exposed to it ever in the real world is kind of troubling to me. We need to get you reading some fiction and stuff,
Right, exactly.
Yeah. People need to read Stephen King's books. And even if you don't like that kind of plot, we cannot argue with Stephen King's success in the marketplace. And just keep a list in one book of the number of grammar rules that he breaks and gets away with, because he's telling a story and he gets in readers' heads. There are no rules.
Well put,
sure. Yeah. That reminds me of one time someone told me never to use a semicolon because no one knew what they were used for. And like this, no one, like it was a huge mystery. And I was like, and I'm usually not very good at quoting definitions, but I think I was closer to college at the time, so they were a little more in my head. And I was like, I think they're basically it's two close but independent clauses. Like there's a reason, there's a definition how to use them. Use them list. There's all kinds of ways you can use them. I don't know. No. You should never use that. Just take that out. Some short story. I think I published at some point. But yeah, you get all of the wild ones. The one that was going to be my worst piece of advice actually goes along with that, because someone, and I think King actually, I haven't read it, but I think people have told me this from his book, so it could be wrong. But there was the wake up every day and always write at kind of the same place, the same time, which is very well meaning and great if you can make that happen. But the way the person telling me it interpreted it was wake up at 5 a.m. You write 2,000 words, whatever it is, and then you start your day from there. And I don't do anything at 5 a.m. Like I sleep. There's like, if I'm awake at 5 a.m., it's stumbling. Like I can barely like process things. My wife doesn't even bother talking to me because I'll wake up to use the bathroom or something, and she'll see me and say something, and I'll just kind of give her a blank stare. So probably not the most conductive, time for writing, from there. But awesome. So let's get to question one for today. Writing craft. So this one about why do stories break and how do you fix them? So at break, wherever you guys want to take it. I mean, it could be plot holes, it can be, character inconsistencies. However, just what that point when you're writing and then you feel like the whole story structurally for some reason has kind of fallen out of place. So maybe John, then you can start us with this one and we'll go around the horn.
It's interesting. And full disclosure, we're not hit with these cold. You would send these out ahead of time. And this one confused me only because there's kind of an underlying assumption here that a story is a thing before it's finished. And for me, I don't outline. I start with the premise and then the story kind of unfolds. So it's never, you can't break clay. You can bend it and you kind of mold it. And for me, it's always fixable. You get to a point you realize, all right, this direction where I thought I was going, and this is where I am in the Burned Bridges that I'm writing now. I'm still trying to figure out what I know basically where I'm going, but what's the best way to get there? So you try it's the voyage of discovery, and that's all right. That seemed like a really good idea 25 pages ago, but it's really not playing out. It's boring. Maybe it's the wrong point of view character that I'm telling it through. So you go back and you try something new. The same thing with plot holes for me. You just kind of fix it as you go along. If you realize, okay, I need a second floor on this house, or I need to have a gun under the chair, or whatever the case may be, you can always go back and fix it as you go along. So I don't see it during the writing process. I don't see I don't see it ever as a broken. I don't see a story as ever broken. In fact, it's kind of I'm an engineer by background. When I had a big boy job, so I think that's the fun of the process is to see how you make it all work and then go back and fit it together, and then you got to make the splices invisible, right? So you got to match the same voice that you had 2 months ago when you first wrote that section and make it sound like it's all part of the same narrative. So that's all. Nothing there is broken. It's just kind of it's being shined.
Mm-hmm. Sure. No, I get you. I guess what I was getting at is more like, because I think that's a great point. And I love that you used clay as the example for it, because I think of writing very much like that as sculpting, right? As you get something, you need some clay, and then you kind of figure it out and work it to where you get it to the image that it's meant to be, or that you're intending. So I guess maybe then, rather than broke, right, when you hit those hurdles, right? So I'm thinking because I've talked with writers about this before, is then, hey, I'm writing this thing and I just hit this point. And I think there tends to be those two camps, right? Like there's like the pantsers and then there's the like kind of outliners and plotters, right? Just to put it in two very broad buckets, because I'm sure there's everything in between. And I think you could kind of come up with different problems. Like I would fall in that pantser bucket. What some of my fellow pantsers, have come up with before is, now everything's kind of spewed out of control and I don't know where to go anymore. Like I just have all of these plots, right? Or subplots and these things going on, these characters, and I don't know how to continue. So maybe rather than broken, that's a better way to put it, would be just like when, as a writer, you hit that, I don't know where to go from here. Like I've hit a intellectual dead end on this at the moment. How do you push past that dead end? And I think you gave some suggestions there as well, talking about it. You want to take it from there, Matt? You want to jump in?
Yeah, it's so interesting what John said and what you said. It's true. The beauty of writing is that so many times you kind of fail in private, most of the time, right? It's like I came from stand-up comedy when I was in my teens and early 20s. That was my passion. I watched a lot. That was terrifying because you'd write new material.
Sure.
And you'd be like, oh, tonight's the big night for this reveal, and you thought it was funny and you tested it out on a few people who were like, oh, that could be funny. It depends on the delivery. and then it would just do nothing, right? And that was terrifying. So with writing now, I kind of go, oh, let me have some fun. Let me, to use John's example, put a gun under the chair, just so I have something to work with or an idea in my head. Okay, this is it. And it has danger. And then it's great because you're a bit of a time traveler. You go back, you say, oh, the gun is just not needed. Cool. Let me go back, get rid of that. Let me, you can constantly refine, right? Rewrite and figure it out. But I think, yeah, like when I'm stuck, it's usually because there's just not enough happening, right? I'm writing a lot of moments. I'm not writing a lot of plot. So you say, okay, how do I make this moment? The John le Carré quote of, a dog sleeping on a bed is not a moment, but a cat stealing the dog's bed, or is not a plot, but a cat stealing the dog's bed. I'm kind of butchering it, but you get the idea. Now we have a plot, right? So many times to me, it kind of falls to plot. And then many times when plots aren't working, I say, I think I need more. Like sometimes one plot isn't necessarily enough. You need a bit of a braid. So you need some backstory, you need some context, you need to kind of work at all those other parts. But yeah, it depends a little bit on the drafting process because you can always go back and you get a little bit closer to your target with every single draft, hopefully. And so that's always kind of encouraging, and sometimes they come out like, draft 3 looks pretty good and you're happy. You're like, hey, I did a lot of what I wanted. And sometimes draft 9 is just like, oh man, this is going to be more work than I thought. So it kind of just depends on what happened in there. And if you got a little lucky and things worked out. I think with this recent book I wrote, it was the first time I had kind of no idea where I was headed. I did know where I wanted to end up, but on like a day-to-day thing, I was coming to the desk kind of terrified. I found myself like, oh, I'll spend a little more time at the sink doing dishes. And, let me go down to the mail. I heard some noise. I think the mail's here. Like I didn't want to go to the desk because I was
where's the honey to-do list? You're like, I'm going to
go to the DMV and see if I can renew this license finally. Yeah, it was just like really, I noticed I was just frightened because I didn't know what was going to happen, but it also made it the most fun and interesting experience because I was taking more risks and putting more obstacles in the way and things of that nature that I think I needed to make that book shine.
I think it's also important not to discount the subconscious stuff that's going on. I think it was 2 books ago. I think it was Stealth Attack. A couple of books ago. I was well into. I was screaming up on the deadline, and I was telling my wife, I don't have a third act. I love the story. I was, neck deep into peril. I mean, I had them buried in peril. I had no idea how I was going to get them out. And I'm one of those that the harder I look straight at a problem, the more elusive the problem becomes. So it comes to, I don't know, showering, doing dishes, doing something that had completely unrelated to writing, and then it kind of hits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that it was some of that unrelated stuff. The answer was there. I had put it there, and I don't know. I won't go into the woo-woo of it, like, I had subconsciously put it there. But the fact was, it was there. I had the equipment, I had the character. All I had to do was short circuit a little bit of plot, and the whole thing came together. So stuff happens for a reason in this, and I think sometimes we get wrapped too tight on trying to make things. We overthink getting things perfect. And particularly for the stuff that I write commercial fiction. I write thrillers. I give people a fun ride. And I think what I do is well written. I hope it's well written. I hope it's well characterized. But more than anything else, it's fun. So I default to the fun and exciting, and sometimes turn away from the perfect circle, the perfect close of the book, which I think we've all written that story that is like, wow, that was really cool. That came together perfectly. And
Mhm.
there are some that, it comes really close, but some books are better than others. And I'm not going to get into naming which ones I think are which. Um, but but at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to entertain the reader, finish the story, and move on to the next story. And that's true whether you're a professional writer, journeyman writer who's collecting a check and paying bills with it. If you're a professor, or if you're a writer just starting out, finishing the damn thing is as important as anything else. And and it's there. Make it work.
Right, right, amen. Well, I like how you brought up the subconscious, actually, because I tend to think of it. There's a lucid dreaming quality of writing, right? Like lucid dreaming, you get to control your dreams, and I've had it happen once or twice by happenstance, but then I hear people, there's ways you can kind of make it happen for yourself, but there's a dreamlike quality to it that none of it's real, right? So you're like, you can put the gun there, whatever it is, but you kind of have to let your subconscious play out a little bit too, kind of follow it along, and then you guide, you coax in what you need. Because when I was writing the book I spent the last, I guess my marriage on 13, 14 years, Pirates of Appalachia, it's a epic absurdist satire, which I'm not sure those words are meant to go together. But it had a lot going on, and there was one plot thread that I did not understand why it had to be there, but I knew part of me knew it had to be there. And so I just kind of wrote through it, and I think sometimes writers get afraid to kind of write through things. Like there's the thought, I don't know how I'm going to do this, just kind of write through it, because I just wrote through it, kind of trusted that subconsciously something was happening. And then that actually revealed that really what the whole story is about, the crux of it is, it's a treatise on tribalism that's gone to extremes in a society that's too fat and happy just to go to all out war, right? And what does that look like? And I satirize it and everything, but and so it's like, oh, that storyline, that's why it had to be there. And so it fits perfectly there. And that's why I'm doing that. And then once I did that, it revealed kind of everything else. And then you go through and you start, doing that surgery and try to, make all the blemishes go away, so no one notices that you had to, you were revising or not. But
and even if it didn't work, even if it didn't play out well, writing it and getting the words on paper and out of your head is far more productive than second guessing and navel gazing.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing like I was talking to my son about the other day. It's just something on his computer. He was trying to get, the youngins, they like to mod games now, like you change them or something, like nothing that makes sense to me. So I can't even help him at this point. But he got it to work, but then the one piece of it, like he didn't get his characters or his saves or something. And I was like, but you learned how to do all of that. That process, that you just spent hours to do, you just learned how the game works. You learned how to do all these things. So you improved on something you want to do. So that's never a bad thing. Like that's the goal of all things, right? Like you got a little better at something that was important to you. It didn't work out perfectly, but you got better. So even if you throw it away, you cut that portion out, it reveals something to you. If not, it was just the act of writing, and all writing is good. Like you're naturally improving just doing it. So getting into characters then. So is it important to paint likable characters? If so, like how do you go about doing that? And if not, what are some alternatives to, just the kind of likability? And so we start with you, John, last time. Maybe Matt, we start with you this time.
Yeah, this idea of likable characters, I see it like the opposite, maybe a despicable character, so to speak, more and more in television and film. And I will mention to my wife, I don't mind this style of storytelling at all, but I have to be rooting for this character, right? There has to be something that bonds me a little bit. Just seeing, I was watching a show called Bookie the other day on HBO, and it's about this guy who's a bookie. And one of my criticisms in a way, because it was like an enjoyable watch for a half-hour HBO thing, was that the guy wasn't likable enough for me to follow his everyday adventures. He just went like, huh, I don't know if I want to hang out with this person to make it work. But I do think you don't necessarily need a likable character, but I need the motivation for why someone is the way they are so that I can empathize. I can be compassionate. We'll go with that word. Kind of understand and understand kind of the moral dilemma, so to speak, or maybe what's on this character's mind, and allow me to root for them. I think rooting is important. We do tend to root for the likable character. That kind of goes without saying. So how do you make the non-likable character, or maybe the person that's been painted a certain way, at least interesting enough where you'll hear them out? I think I've just had to do this in my middle grade novel, which is, I have a fugitive on the loose, and the fugitive has done some bad things. And my way to do that was to establish that the three-dimensional aspect of this person, that, this was a moment in time when he did the wrong things, but we're greater than just our worst moment. That we have other attributes, and to showcase them and kind of put the reader in a bit of a moral quandary where you're probably going to start to root for him a little bit. And I wanted that. I wanted that a little bit. And I think that that's always interesting. It's like Breaking Bad, right? Where we go, oh, this chemistry teacher is dealing drugs and he's a kingpin. But it works because like you kind of got to know a little bit. First of all, you got to see the turn where he becomes kind of the hero and then the anti-hero. But also we understand, hey, yeah, maybe you should pay teachers a little more, right? Or like maybe health insurance shouldn't bankrupt someone. So those little things, we immediately go like, well, yeah, he did something bad, but maybe he did it for the right reasons a little bit. And then it went a little crazy. So yeah, I think motivation is the key there for me.
Sure. Yeah, I think about that a lot as rather than likable is compelling. Right?
Yeah.
It needs to be something compelling about that character that you want to follow them along. Likable can be good. There's nothing wrong with it. But I do think like my family was watching, I think the show was You, like a guy's a stalker kind of murderer.
Yeah.
And then and then there's Dexter, I think, which I thought Dexter was actually done better. I don't think Dexter is likable, but he's really compelling. And like the story's compelling that he's this forensic guy and now he's killing these serial killers and things. But I don't know how you like Dexter. It's like it's not like you want to go have a beer with Dexter.
Sure. Yeah.
I found him compelling to where I liked that series enough early on. I don't watch a lot of TV, so I did watch some episodes early on. My family watched, my now grown adult daughters and my wife watched it. And I didn't find him compelling or likable, and I could not root for him in any way. And I'm just like, I get this is popular, but I can't do it. I just see this stalker killer guy here that doesn't seem like he's got much going on. So guess it's each and theirs for that one. But you want to jump in, John?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that as writers of books, these often come down to discussions of movies and television shows because that's such a part of our lives now, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many examples. The bottom line is happy people doing happy things happily is boring. It's exactly what you want in your life. It's who you want. That's what you want your neighborhood to be. It's not what you want to read about. So do you want to have likable characters? Sure. But if you have a Ted Lasso, which is, I don't know if you've seen that show, it's like the happiest show ever, but it wouldn't work unless there were sort of those despicable, in a comic way, those despicable characters for him to work against. If they were all like him, you just get a cavity watching the show. Walter White, on the other hand, where nobody is clean, but he's so compelling. And the bad guys, he's the drug dealer is the good guy, and everybody else is the bad guy. They're worse than he is. That tells you something. I've turned out a lot of books with Jonathan Grave who's a killer. He kills for all the right reasons. But if you talk to any law enforcement officer in any of the areas where he's doing his hostage rescue stuff, he's a murderer, right? I mean, extrajudicial assassination for all the right reasons. He only kills bad guys, but still. So I don't think people have to be, they don't have to be, we have to identify, I think we have to identify with the protagonist. Hannibal Lecter is I think, in my opinion, is a great example. He works so well as a really compelling, in the books, and in the movies, but I'm switching over to the books, in Red Dragon and then in Silence of the Lambs, as that secondary character, where it's been too long, where the FBI characters are bouncing off of him. He's such a compelling character. Do you like him? No, but you're afraid of him. Because you're afraid of him, you kind of do like him. But then when they switched over to Hannibal, where he was the star, he was kind of the protagonist, it didn't work because he's so despicable. So in that case, he kind of proves the point that if you can't bond with the main character, for me, all mileage will vary, right? And Hannibal did very well. So if for me, if I can't bond with a character, I can't get into it. Dexter is a good example for me. I found that character to be so despicable that I didn't care to watch the show. I watched a couple of episodes and it made me uncomfortable. There was nothing there. I have better things to do with my time than to feel that uncomfortable trying to get to like somebody that's just terrible. So, it's, again, mileage will vary. For me, it's important as the writer to write a character that I like, and not necessarily that I would want to be, but that I understand and who's coming within his view is coming from an honest place. And that's true of my bad guys too. I think I try to write bad guys who think they're good guys, or they know they're bad guys, but they're business bad guys. They're trying to make some scratch by doing the thing they got to do. And they're doing it in a smart way. They're not, I've never written a serial killer story because, first of all, I think they've been done too much. But I think if it's a point of view character, for me, they only really work if they're three-dimensional and the reader has something to bond with. That's where I get to it.
Yeah. No, I like that you brought that up, the bonding or the relating.
Yeah. Bonding is such a good word for that.
Because I think to give a literature, and Dexter was based on books, so I technically also hit on the books for the record there.
No, it's true. We spend so much time with them, right? Like they're fictional human souls that we are kind of crafting, but we end up spending years or months, and it needs to be compelling for me to show up every day. And I think when we do, I think there is still that bonding thing where you either are trying to get back at the system or there's something empathetic about you. There it goes. I finally found the word. It's something like that where Walter White, like going back to that one again, it's like they establish it very early on. It's like obviously like episode 1 or 2, and then you're kind of in. You're like, they do a great job with the motivation and you bond, and then you're like, all right, let's see how this journey plays out, right? But if I don't get that, if I don't have that bond, it's hard for me. I do feel like John said, like I'm kind of wasting my time. And I go, there's a lot of characters I'd rather bond with. There's other things I'd rather learn.
Well, Walter White's journey is, first of all, I think it's a brilliant show. The writing in that is beyond spectacular. And the way that episodes pay off 20 episodes later is amazing to me. That's just brilliant writing. But Walter White starts out, it's very innocent. He's trying to care for his family. And then he's in so deep that he has to keep going. He can't get out. Like, oh crap, I got to keep it going. And then he turns the corner where it's ego I like this.
Yeah.
And then the final corner, this is not full circle, full square. The final corner is predatory. You know, he's really become the bad guy.
Yeah.
It's really, that was a brilliant bit of writing right there.
It really
Absolutely.
was. By then you're so invested that you still remember like old Walter. And
Right.
so even though he's despicable, you still kind of like the guy.
And you believe his journey because
And you believe his journey. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're
Absolutely.
rooting actively against his very nice brother-in-law, who's law enforcement. You know,
the
I love
only
that
good
character.
guy
Yeah,
in the
he's
entire
good guy.
cast, the only guy in the sun.
Yeah.
Sure.
And he's a really good character. And he's not like a dirty cop or anything like that. He's like actually like an admirable man, but we root against him, right?
Another good example of that, and this comes really close to me because I kind of lived through it, and it was kind of my job at the time, not because I was a spy, but I was spied on. The Americans.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yes. Fantastic.
And those were the programs back in the day. The ones they were spying on were the programs that I was working on. And that whole, I forget the names of the families now. It's been too long. But these embedded Russian spies are really nice. They're, your next door neighbors, the family, right? And
Sure.
I mean,
they would probably be the best neighbors, actually. If you're a spy, you're going to be a great neighbor.
Yeah.
I'm not the greatest neighbor. I have weeds half the time and everything else, but
you're right. Yeah.
But I think that's two things really struck me. One is I think Walter White he starts off very sympathetic, right? So you kind of like him, you can sympathize with what he's doing. He's like a teacher, he's trying to help his family. He starts a very likable character. And you get one of the greatest arcs, in television history, at least. I mean, it's a great arc, I think. Entertainment history generally, like it was a great character arc. But I also think like we tend to talk about, and I wonder how long this will last. Is it tends to be movies or TV that because it's a cultural tipping point. That we can all kind of relate to pretty quickly. I make a Cheers reference. And actually, I'm very happy to hear like Cheers has had like a resurgence on Netflix or whatever, all the old shows now everyone's watching. So now my kids will understand what I'm talking about when I say these things. So that's, score 2 for me. But one of the literary ones I had thought about when I was thinking about the show, this morning was The Great Gatsby. Is that although he's not, it's not Gatsby's point of view. I forget the character exactly point of view, but it's all about Gatsby, and I don't think Gatsby's really that likable. He's a guy that kind of goes money hungry, like does it, but you can really relate to Daisy, the light across the bay, the thing he can't have that he desperately wanted. I think he goes way too far and kind of strays from where I don't think I like Gatsby. But I think it's a great book, and I was very compelled all the way through because at all times I could relate to that feeling. Even I think 19 when I first read it, 20 when I first read it, that feeling of longing and like wanting to grow and be better, and like grow and do these things for something ultimately you can't have, anymore, that maybe never wanted you. I think this comes out within the novel. So the second part of that, maybe we could touch on a little bit here. More the writing advice part of this. So then, writers out there that want to craft a compelling, likable, relatable, whatever way you want to put it, there's obvious plot points and things, but how do you go about kind of crafting a character that's maybe not, quote unquote likable, but that is relatable enough to compel the reader to keep, flipping through the pages. So, I don't know where we last went, so Matt, we'll just go with you.
Okay. Yeah, that's the art of it, right? Is that there's really no one way, but whenever I'm writing and I need to feel that bond, so there needs to be maybe regret, remorse, someone who's done something wrong, if that's the point of view you're going for, and maybe, this character treats animals well, Maybe there's little flourishes.
They save the cat.
Yeah, or maybe there's a little like beetle crawling on his back and he can't find his footing, and we see the character kind of flip him right side up. Or, those little flourishes do a lot of heavy lifting for you, and you're not just painting someone in a particular way. You're you're rounding them out. And me as the writer starts going, okay, yeah, this is a bad person, but maybe it was a bad person for that day. Maybe they're on their road to redemption here. Maybe they acknowledge it. I think also just acknowledging that they did something wrong, and showing actual progress or what have you is a great way to do it. I will always think of that if I'm writing a character because I want you to be along. I want you to be able to bond and I want you to be able to root. Those things are essential for me as a writer. I don't think I could write something when I watch some shows or read some books where I just go, oh, this is clearly like a despicable character from the beginning, right? My wife was super in. I'm doing another TV show. There was this big one on HBO recently with Brian Cox that everybody loved.
Succession.
Yes. And it was a beautifully written show and interesting and great, turns and things. But I remember telling my wife, like, I just think I would like this more if there was one person I could latch onto. And my brain wanted to be like, oh, I'm going to love Kendall. But truthfully, Kendall was also kind of horrible. So it ended up kind of being in this thing where I just didn't get as invested as I could have. So that's a me issue, though, but I probably would have written that show with just a touch more sympathy for one of the characters or tried to get you to root for one of them. But obviously they didn't need me in the writer's room. They did very well. So
sure. Yeah, I think that's a great it's a great point. One of to bring up another HBO show. They did House of the Dragon. It's the Game of Thrones universe. It's set before it or something. And my wife and I were big Game of Thrones fans, and so we watched it. And the king in that is that character. He's that character. You're like, oh, he actually has good intentions all along. It's been out for a while, so spoiler alert if people are going to watch it and they haven't yet. But he ends up dying, and so we're like season 2. I'm like, I'm not sure how it's going to work because everyone else is kind of loathsome and stuff. He was that, you could fault his decision making and whatnot, but he's constantly trying to keep the kingdom together, keep his family together. And he does a brilliant performance. That's Brian Cox. I made Succession for me once the character passed away. I kind of lost interest because that he was such a brilliant actor. In fact, my family gets annoyed with me because actually they realize I've become very obsessed with like older people. And once I realized it's like a window into the future, I'm like, oh, all the stuff I'm going through, someone else has already been through, and I can just ask them. Like it's like a cheat code that like young people like refuse to like accept. And I'm like, oh, I love this. And I've also gotten very like, I love older actors because I think they kind of hit like the F it mode, and they're like, I'm just going to do my thing. I'm going to be great at this, I don't care about the directors. And Brian Cox, I was like, it's just brilliant. Every time he's on the screen, I'm like, he's awful, but he's brilliant. And I love watching this. And that can be a character trait you can have too, is where, hey, they're kind of awful, but man, they're just so compelling. They're so brilliant all the time.
He was the first Hannibal Lecter, right?
Was he?
Yeah.
In Manhunter, made in 1982.
That's right.
It was the first adaptation of Red Dragon done by Dino De Laurentiis. Michael Mann directed it. William Peterson played the detective, the profiler. Just so I throw that out.
Interesting. Yeah, I kind of remember my mom saying that at one point.
That's funny. I never knew. Yeah.
How do you get down to the character? How do you make what is it? How do you make a character sensitive? How do you make him relatable?
However,
real life and fictional life comes down to the tiny moments, and I think that's whether it's a thriller, it's science fiction. I won't speak to romance because I've never read one, but I will presume. You have the set pieces, you have the big things, but that's not necessarily where characterization happens. It all contributes, right? Every scene contributes to every other scene. I remember there was, in my own life, this was one of the most formative moments of my life, that when I was a firefighter EMT, 22 years old, 23. I won't go into all the details. It was a particularly horrific pediatric fatality. And I was in the ambulance, which was like, because I was a rookie college boy. And I had been consigned to the ambulance, which was like the bottom of the barrel. And this is a guy, his name is Dave. And he spent his life up my ass. He is just that gristled guy who just, I don't know, he had a thing. And he was the guy that really was tough on me. And I came back in the fire. It was late. It was like 2 a.m. And I'm not going to sleep. I was sitting in the kitchen, which is big, this is a country firehouse. So I wasn't particularly morose. It was what it was. And I was sitting there by myself. I wanted my alone time, having a cup of coffee. And Dave came and he sat, it was a long picnic table. And, I was sitting, in this corner, and he came and he sat on that corner. We really didn't like each other. and he came, he's the only one. He came down, he sat there, I don't know, 20 minutes, and had a cup of coffee and said nothing. And he said, "You okay?" He said, "I'll be okay." He said, "Welcome to fire service, kid." And he went upstairs. And in that moment, there was more spoken in the silence, and there was more bonding that happened. We became buds in that moment without dialogue, And I have tried to capture that moment a number of times in several of the books. But that's where characterization happens. So how do you make? There's no way if I won't say his last name because he's not with us anymore. But if he would be so embarrassed if I cracked that facade, because he's got to ride other rookies' asses because that's what he does. That's kind of his persona. But everybody who's gone past that knows that he's this teddy bear. This is the rite of passage you have to get through. Mm-hmm. Think of that character, just that's what you got to capture as a writer, if that's what the character is. Right. It's the little things that matter. Mm-hmm. And to try to find that little lightning bug, right? And capture it.
It's so true. That's very well said.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant story. I mean, for capturing characterization. I think what it shows, and I tend to, when I think about characters, I try to think of them as protagonist and antagonist, right? So it's like, in that situation, you're like, oh, it's nowadays we call everything bullying. Oh, this guy's bullying me or whatever, right? He's giving me a hard time. He's right in my ass. But throwing out the real kind of horrible bullying that can happen, right? The normal stuff where you are riding someone's ass or something. They also, they see it as a reason they're doing it, right? Like, I want to make sure you're actually committed to this. You're not someone that thinks being a fireman is just a cool ass job and you're going to get chicks. No, I'm going to ride your ass and make sure you're committed. And I don't know if that's what he's thinking, and just throwing stuff out. But if you look at it from their point of view, is they're a protagonist in their story. You're the antagonist.
Everybody's a protagonist in their story. Everybody acts in their own best interest.
Right. And then we have these different antagonists, and it changes, right? You're friends, you're not friends. My wife always teases me because she's like, you think everyone likes you all the time. That's not true. And I'm like, if they don't like me now, it's just because they're going to like me later. It's fine. It's like some stupid haunting stories. They're like, oh, I think this place is haunted. I'm like, I've never been worried about ghosts. She's like, oh my God, why? Why aren't you worried about ghosts? I'm like, they'll like me. Why would a ghost bother me? Like, I think they'll find me likable, and they'll be like, oh, this guy's fine. He'll be here, But I think if you take that to your characters and you really think through, and go, okay, even if this isn't a point of view character in their world, their little fictional world that I'm creating, they are a point of view character. They have something going on. And I think that's a brilliant way to kind of round them out. If you take that time and really consider where they're coming from. Okay, so last question for our open bar tonight. So where do you derive inspiration from the general sense? I realize story to story can be different. And then how do you overcome those moments with either low inspiration, maybe low motivation is better, like when you're just not motivated to kind of, to hit the typewriter. How do you overcome that and kind of soldier on? So I know last time we started with you, Matt, so maybe John, we start with you this time.
All right. I think too much is made of what I call the woo-woo of writing. You want to be a writer, you write. You show up, you put your ass in the seat, and you write. I was a safety engineer for 35 years. I was a firefighter. You show up and you do the thing you got to do. I sit down and I make stuff up. So you sit down, you make stuff up. If the story is not at the tip of my brain, as you would say, then I start writing whatever is there. And sooner or later, the story will start to flow. I think it's a kiss of death and there's a difference between what I'll call a journeyman writer. And I think I can call myself that at this point. I've been doing this for a very long time and a whole lot of books. So I know, because I have faith in my ability to make stuff happen. And the faith comes from the fact that I've done it a lot of times. For the new writers who are out there and are watching this, you got to have faith that is going to happen. If you wait for the inspiration angel to come and smack you between the eyes, or for the muse, I don't even know what a muse is, to come and give you the inspiration to write, you're going to die unpublished. It's a job in the best sense of it. You set out to accomplish a goal, and a job is the accomplishment of a goal. And the goal is to create a story. You don't necessarily know when you sit down what the story is going to be, but you know that it's got to have a beginning and a middle and an end. And it ain't going to happen unless you make it happen. You're the only person in the universe who can make it happen. So sit down and do it. At the end, after you've gone all the way through it, if you don't like it, fine, scrap it or change it or whatever you're going to do with it. But don't make that judgment before you start. So inspiration doesn't matter. Inspiration is a thing that I don't think it is a thing. It's ephemeral. It's ephemeral. Ephemeral. You see, now I got a word I can't do. We all
it's
have
usually me. I'm glglad it wasn't me.
At least yours is an SAT word. That was good.
I think all of that is kind of writerly excuses for reasons not to sit down and do the thing you got to do. Just sit down and do the thing you got to do.
Sure. Well, I love that you said that. I want to give a little background for people watching, because if you haven't seen your episode, and actually I should make sure this comes out after your episode airs, but either way, I'll link it up. But so you had a good career going. Right? You had a career. It was a small business, I think, when you sold Nathan's Run, but that was doing very well. And then I think the way you and your wife put it was you got your big boy day job, like real job, or your big boy job, going. So you sell Nathan's Run, another book, wild success. I think they both got optioned, and
it was
started writing full time. Yeah, right. It was a great time, like every writer's dream, right? They always talk about. And then you end up going back and becoming the safety engineer, right? So the reason I wanted to bring the context is that it's very popular to villainize corporate America today, and I think for some good reasons. The bad reasons, though, because I've done this, I'm technically still am a director of quality regulatory for a medical device company. You also realize that there's just a way to get things done. And no matter what that is, you form a process. We like to talk writing process. And I still haven't covered it on this one of these open bars. I guess I should cover it one of these days. But if you have, for safety, I assumed if there's a safety event, there's a process you follow to kind of go figure out what the root cause is, figure out how to like fix those, and you follow it through. You don't know exactly where that process is going to take you. You trust that the process will get you where you need to be.
Right.
And I think writing, there's a professionalism you need to take to it if you want to fix the thing, which is, okay, I'm a writer. I write things. I can start from nothing and finish this thing. I need to have a process and trust that process. I'm going to follow it through, and that will get me to where I need to go.
And people conflate professionalism with paycheck, and professionalism is an attitude. It's how do you approach the problem. It has nothing to do with whether or not you get paid for it. You know, more often than not, one hopes that a professional attitude results in a paycheck, but a professional attitude means you work the problem in a way that's designed to solve the problem. And the problem for a writer is the story.
Mm-hmm. Sure, absolutely. I think it's a great way to look at it, right? The problem is the story, right? The question's the story out. What's the solution? The climax is the end, is where you're going. So, yeah, thank you for that. I had to add that because I think sometimes you can, if you're in, and God love you, Matt, I don't mean this as a negative, academia, you don't necessarily have to be productive in creating new things, right? You need to be a productive teacher or something, but you don't, it's not like having a manufacturing line there that falls apart and then now the business doesn't make money and you're laid off, right? Like it's a very different scenario than kind of that corporate quote unquote kind of world. So nothing wrong with it, but you need to also, like, writing wise, I think it is sometimes it's good to think of it as commodity that I need to build and that I need to ship off. And I'm very woo-woo in general. I already brought up Bigfoot once and Ghost, I think, and other times. Like, I'm probably the most woo-woo of the three here. The muses call to me. I believe very much in my muses, but I also believe very much in but if I'm not there to lay brick, no fence is ever getting built, right? I have to show up and I need to do things. If I show up and do those things, then the muses, the inspiration, whatever, it will be there for me. The gods will be there for me if I, put the tributes out and I do everything, because the gods are within me, right? At some point, you're just channeling what's already within you, and you're pushing it out. So, anywho, I've digressed way too far on this, but thanks for that, John. Matt, you want to take it from there? Now that I've callously, unintentionally,
we've got everything
academia.
except sacrificing humans on a slab, but keep going.
No, it's funny because they say the dialogue of agreement is kind of boring, but I have to agree a lot with John here. Like, people have called me prolific, and I really don't think of myself that way at all. It's just that I do daily work. And when you do daily work, I say this to young writers all the time, like, pages pile up pretty fast. And if you're when you're a writer, you are your own boss. And the question kind of becomes, what kind of boss are you? And I'm pretty intense. So we don't take a lot of time off, and we hit deadlines, and I set goals for myself, and I hit those benchmarks. I'm probably way harder on myself than if someone was like in a writing class, I'm harder on myself now than the teachers were in my MFA program or something. It was 30 pages a month. That's nothing. Now I'm like, whatever, I can do that. Like, I'm doing 3 pages a day if I'm in my writing zone, or 4 pages a day, what have you. And I think there's a lesson to be learned just by the victory of, like, small accomplishments, daily work. You get your butt in the chair and you do your 2 hours, whatever you got, and then you leave off there and you come back the next day, and then you say, oh, wow, this week was a good week. It was a, 13-page, 14-page week. If I do this for a substantial amount of time, I have my new book. It might not be perfect, but I will have something to work on, right? I'd rather have a bad first draft than just, a good one and going to cafes and talking about it, but it's all in my brain. That doesn't do anything for anybody. Um, so I think life, we talk about how short life is all the time. Life is short, life is short. Life is quite long. And, there are obviously tragic things that occur, but in the grand scheme of things, like, you have a lot of time to do what you want to do, and how do you want to use it? And I just wanted to be a guy that didn't talk about writing. I found those people kind of exhausting, and I just wanted to write. And so it was, there's a quote like, don't be a writer, be writing. And I remember going, oh yeah, that's good. I don't go to a party necessarily and go like, oh, I'm an author, but I usually always go with a teacher or something there because it's just a more palatable thing for people to get behind. But I remember just going like, oh, cool. Like, I want to be able to put out work. I want to hold myself to high standards. So inspiration kind of comes from just living life, seeing things that interest me. I was talking earlier about my middle grade book and my mom's smattering of black and white photos of her feeding her goats in rural Ohio and things like that, but then it's like John said, you come to the desk and you go like, all right, well, what the hell am I going to do? Like, I can't just write about my mom feeding goats. So like, what can I do? Oh, I have an idea, and it's kind of intense, and we just go. You have to have some faith that you're going to jump out of an airplane and grow some wings. And the more you do it, the easier in some ways it is with that feeling, but it's never really easier to write. Writing's always hard. Writing's always scary, and I think that's why I like it. But you do get better with the feeling of jumping out of the airplane.
Now, I was at a conference ages ago, probably 20 years ago, and there was she was a mystery writer. She's a psychologist in her real life in Muncie, Indiana, at a conference called Magna Cum Murder at Ball State University, testicle
Cool.
tech. And she was, this is one of these panels where, I don't know, 4 or 5 people, and she was the one that was immediately before me. And she was talking about how writing, if you're going to be successful, writing has to become your top priority, and that you have to be willing to give up your kids' soccer games, and you have to be willing to not attend dinners, and you have to be willing to do, all of these family sacrifices. And she's droning on and on and on about these things. She's a psychologist. Mm. Writing is not, she's paying her bills by being a psychologist. She's not paying her bills she's not, a professional writer. Well, she is a professional writer, and said she's getting paid for her writing, but that's not what's paying the bills. Mm-hmm. And I see all these people taking notes, and they're hearing what they want to hear. And then it's my turn. And my first words were, to the audience, probably my last words to her was, for God's sake, it's only a story. It's not worth any of that. It's life is life. You got to live life. There's nothing there's nothing more important than family. So, nothing's worth missing the kids' soccer game. It's like, if you got a choice, right? You got to got to do family stuff. Family always comes first, hard stop, period. And people make odd choices when it comes to this. There's something people find romantic about the lonely writer's garret and the whole bohemian lifestyle, which I just think sucks. I can't imagine, if I had to live in abject poverty to write, I'd rather be a firefighter or a coal miner and actually pay my bills. It's just not, everybody finds their own way. And I think that for the young writers who are watching this, what do you want to be? Is it, if you're a writer, if you're telling stories for your family, that's a wonderful reason to write stories, to leave a legacy for your family. If your goal is to be a best-selling author, if that's why you're setting out, give up. That's just that's a silly goal to have. because that's lightning strikes and unicorn hair. And, I'm the first one to say I've been blessed with lightning strikes and unicorn hair. None of it went to my head, but it's just, there's so much serendipity that goes into that, and some level of talent and other things too. But, I think people need to approach writing as a balanced part of their life. It's one of the things that you do. And if you want to do it well, you do it regularly, and you do it with an eye toward quality. Attend conferences, do you work well? Matt, I'll ask you this. As a professional writing instructor, writing teacher, writing professor, I'm sure what the right what I'm trying to say here, but what is your recommendation for people who go to a conference? If they attend a conference that they're in a writing class that I teach, I'm going to tell them this, and this. I'm completely self-taught. I have no clue if what I'm saying is wrong, or right. All I know is that I'm telling them what has worked for me. Yeah. You're telling them what you're telling them. They're going to show stuff to their neighbor or to their writing group at the country club, and they're going to hear stuff from there. How do you tell them how to balance all these opinions? And then they got their own, because they're obviously writers themselves. And they wouldn't have written it and submitted it if they didn't think it was good to begin with. So who's right and who's wrong, and how do you tell them to know to judge that?
Yeah, that's the greatest. It's true that too much feedback. I usually show them a photo of this cartoon where there's like an elephant head and a dog's body and a leopard's tail, and it's got stegosaurus spikes. And I usually say, this is what happens when you incorporate all the feedback people give you, right? Like this idea that you're going to please everybody and nobody all at once. So you have to kind of know what the story is that you want to tell. It goes back to kind of the motivation. Are you writing for your family? What are you trying to get out of this story, right? Is this supposed to be a thriller? Is this supposed to be a love story? What are you trying to get? And how do we get there the best? So I say, sometimes you're in a workshop and two people are really getting your story. They're on the same wavelength as you. And, this is kind of your perfect beta reader. Take their advice more than the other person who's doing their best, but giving you advice for maybe the story they would write. So that is a skill in and of itself, though, that is developed over a while. I had not been to a writing workshop until I was almost 30 years old. And I remember just being like, oh man, like, are all these people? But then you realize, oh, these are opinions, right? And you take from that.
There's a skill to giving that opinion too.
Absolutely. Right? And some people don't
so the opinions you're getting, they're going to have various skill sets on giving you an informed, conscientious.
And I remember thinking like, I am not qualified enough to speak. And I didn't speak my whole first workshop. I think I said like 7 words. And I'm not like a really quiet guy. So but I felt in that moment, like, I don't want to say something that's incorrect. And I don't want to lead someone down the wrong path. And I'm not qualified to speak yet. And when I feel like I have something to say that's really meaningful, I will speak. But I think it's an important question. So for me, a lot of it is balancing, and a lot of it's feel. It's very hard to teach writing, to teach someone how to write. It's because so much of it is feel, so much of it's personal, but it's about reps. I try to get students reps. I try to say, like, we're going to write a lot.
That's the basketball fan coming out just now.
Yeah.
Right? The reps.
Yeah, I just say, like, we're going to do a lot of starting stories, ending stories, where things fell apart. How can we make that better? Injecting some life into it, coming up with ideas. And I try to guide them to guide themselves through that process, because the more they can do that, that's really the life of a writer. It's very isolating. You're alone a lot with your thoughts, and you're there to kind of pull yourself through these moments more often than anything else. And all those like writing groups and stuff, they're good, but they're not going to pull you through all the time. No.
Do you think that do you know James Scott Bell by chance?
No.
Okay. He's a Angelino.
Oh, okay.
He's a friend of mine.
Oh, cool.
I think he is Writer's Digest books most prolific and best-selling writer on how to write books. He's really good, and cool. He's also a really good writer. We've had a number of discussions over the years. Anyway, I digress. One of the discussions we have, and I won't tell you where he comes down, nor I tell you where I come down. Do you think that writing fiction can be taught to anyone and make them successful to the degree, for example, that anybody can be, we all can write. All God's children can write. If you can do the alphabet and, you take high school English class and all that, you can put words on the page. But in order to create an emotional experience for someone that is to a professional level, that's something else. Can that level be taught all the way through?
I don't think so. I always go on that side. Like, I think writing's very unique that way because everyone can do it. Everyone writes an email or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not like a trumpet where if you put a trumpet and said, come on up, like it weeds you out real fast. So the act of typing and putting words in a row and putting a period can be done by anyone. The second part that you mentioned, I don't think it's for everyone. And I've seen people kind of drop out and stop writing just because what they were trying to express after many attempts, or that human element, the emotion, that either kind of catches fire or it doesn't. Well, I try to lay down the kindling, get everything, especially with younger writers, but you see kind of some that gravitate and kind of have a natural talent for it and will work through the hard parts, and others that are just like this kind of dance of dialogue, plot. It's either like just a little bit of a foreign language and they're not able to fully grasp what we're doing. Yeah.
As a teacher,
I think that
and as a teacher, it's the wrong answer.
No. Where I was going to go with this. Now I'm writing a novel in my head, right? So as a teacher, do you encounter the students who have that talent but don't embrace that talent and refuse to develop that talent and make you want to beat your face into the wall because they won't do it?
Yes.
Well, and actually, let's go back one step. We can come back to that because I have to disagree a little bit on this. Okay. Because I think everyone can learn to sing, right? Like, I'm an awful singer. I love karaoke, but I will butcher it and I will enjoy it. But I think everyone can be taught to sing to some degree. Not all the singers that we hear on the radio that become wildly famous for it are the best singers, right? I don't think there's, I don't want to, and I don't even know the popular singers nowadays to be able to kind of point someone out, to be frank. But Madonna is not the best singer, right? Maybe dancing, all of this, but like you can find a lot of examples. So I think anyone can be taught to write to some degree of competence. Mm-hmm. They can form some stories and things. And the success part, if what you're grading success on is commercial success, a lot of that is lightning in the bottle. It's getting I don't think Harry Potter, God bless whatever J.K. Rowling is. Yeah. It's the best written book. I don't think it's probably not the best written book that year. Probably not even the top 20. But it kind of caught lightning in a bottle, kind of caught a cultural moment, sometimes it's just timing, place, right? Not to say it's poorly written, but from what I've written with the kids, it's also not what I would put up there as this fine literature, right? So I think you have to be really careful about what you classify as success or not. Mm-hmm. So if it's commercial success, that's fine, but that doesn't also mean you're the best writer necessarily. It might, right? Shakespeare had lots of commercial success at the time, and we still regard him very highly. Lots of writers are commercially successful and still also really fine writers, but it's not one-to-one all the time. So I would say yes, probably most people, not everyone, right? We're talking bell curves for everything. I would think most people can be written, like taught. And if they're dedicated, right, there's the being professional and dedicated about going about doing it. They could probably be competent, probably be commercially successful. May never become a great writer. That's where I would agree with you, Matt. I don't think they're going to necessarily become the greatest writer because there's a certain talent, to it. Just like playing basketball, just like playing anything else, there's a talent that you have or you don't, right? You're 7 foot and can jump out of the gym, or you can't, right? I mean, that kind of plays actors, anything, right? You can be taught to act and become a competent actor. Doesn't mean you're going to be, what was the gentleman we just mentioned earlier from Succession?
Brian Cox.
Brian Cox, right? Doesn't mean you're going to end up becoming Brian Cox one day, but you can become a competent actor. And that competent actor may become Tom Cruise, become wildly famous, and being Tom Cruise in a jet, Tom Cruise as a spy, or Tom Cruise as the next thing. So I think they're separate questions a little bit, but it kind of really depends on how you measure success, right? Like, so what do you want, but also who do you want to be, with it?
I think many times, like, I'm able to bring out someone's voice, and that's always a nice thing as an instructor, to kind of pull out someone's authentic writing voice, and that can lead to some very interesting things that happen. But other people, like, not every student has, I think everyone has a writing voice, but not everyone is willing to necessarily put in the work to get it, or has kind of the natural tendency. I do think writing is kind of something, I would love to be able to play music, but every time I try to learn, it just doesn't really work for me. There's something about my left hand and my brain, and it like doesn't work when I play piano. And I can read music, but I stink, and after a while, I just thought, like, I will always appreciate music, but I think I have to make peace with the fact that, like, I could work on it for a long time, and I'm never going to be the piano player I'd like to be. And I think there's a lot of that sometimes in writing, where people, they can read music, or they can read writing, and they can understand plot and syntax, but the story.
And we all think in language, so we all have this idea that, like,
writing is very, writing's very accessible. I mean, how many times have any of us had a conversation with someone where they say, "Oh, I want to write a book," and people start talking about their book, and you're going, "You're never going to write this book, right? Like, you're just going to talk about it for 40 years." I mean, I've met the same person who keeps telling me about the same book sometimes, like 12 years later. And I think it's an attainable idea, and that person could sit down and write that book. But to have what, like John was saying, that emotional resonance, that's a skill that I think is something maybe not everybody has, And then, like John was saying earlier, like, I have those students that are terrific, and you go, "Oh, you kind of have this talent for this. You see the world in story, right? Natural storyteller, the man got on the bus and sat behind me, like," and you're just like, "Oh, wow, what a good first line. You're into it, and you're only 14." And they don't really pursue it. And every now and then it warms my heart, because I'll get an email saying, like, "Hey, I came back to writing, and I'm working at, Sony or something," or, "I wrote a collection of poetry," and I'm like, "Oh, good. Like, I'm so glad, because that was a very pretty flower that just needed to be, like, have some sun hit it." Right.
Sure.
So it is interesting. But, like,
well, and I don't mean to imply that everyone is going to do
No,
it.
I hear what you're saying, because the levels of, like, success is interesting, but I think, like, about that emotional putting me in my chair and, like, "Oh, wow, like, I want to read this person's work." I don't know if everyone can pull that off, between maybe not having the innate talent and then the work ethic and the skill to refine it. Like, that's just something that is
it's funny because in sports we accept that, We accept that, hey, you maybe don't have the innate talent, maybe you don't have the work ethic, you don't have, just the height, the weight, whatever it might be. And I know you need to go in a second, Matt, so we'll wrap up here.
No, you're fine.
But in softer mediums like writing or something like that, we don't like to think of it that way. But there is still limitations, on us. I always think like, my goal is just to be the best I can be, not anything else. Like I just try to hone this as best as I can.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you're fine. Like you're going to be as great as you can. And that's going to be work ethic. That's all those things. There's certain things you can control. I can control my work ethic. I can control how hard I work at things, how mindful I am, how intellectually humble I am, so I can take in more information. But it doesn't mean that I have Shakespeare's talent necessarily, right? There's going to be a certain wordplay, whatever it is, like just thinking ability that maybe I don't, have. But I can control all the others. I'm just going to do the best I can with the talent I have. But you were going to say something, John?
Yeah, I think it's the nature. Excuse me, I think it's the nature of the arts that there is no objective standard. You take the best cellist at the best city symphony in America, in the world. He's not Yo-Yo Ma, because there's something that Yo-Yo Ma can make happen when he plays. Maybe not now, but at his peak. That there's something alive that happens in the transition of the music that comes out of his instrument. That's true of dancers. That's true of certain singers. You can have Michael Bublé versus Frank Sinatra. Michael Bublé tries so hard to be Frank Sinatra. He's not Frank Sinatra. There's an X factor there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true of writers as well. I think it's true of all of the arts, and that's the the very top level that can't be taught. And if it can't be taught there, then it makes sense that all the way down there's a level for me that can't be taught. Now there is a community. Go to Yo-Yo Ma. There's a community orchestra. Fairfax Symphony Orchestra in Virginia. I sang with them a lot. As I am not, I've sang with the Fairfax Symphony Orchestra. So
so you're the singer of the group.
Yeah. So, but not at the Met, right? So, they're fine instrumentalists, but none of them could be in the Washington National Symphony, and certainly never could be at the New York Philharmonic, right? So they're all playing their best. They're all doing the very best that they can. And you can take it to athletics and everything else. And I think people are hesitant, that we're very happy to hold athletes to that standard. And I think we're very hesitant to hold that standard to the softer, to the arts. I didn't mean to take this down a negative pathway. It's interesting. An observation.
Where's you and your colleague? Where do you said that your friend, he writes the kind of
he believes that anybody can be taught to a journeyman level.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I think that you can be taught to a level, but then there are like some X factors, some things that
and I think there's I think there is kind of the to Matt, to your point a little earlier, right? Like, do you actually have the temperament to sit down when you need to, right? Like, there's anyone, but so some people just don't have the work ethic or what, right? There's other factors.
Yeah, there's so many X factors. There's kind of just the way. Yeah, you got to want it. There's like kind of a muscle, like the way you see the world, like that. That to me is many times with writers, you see that same muscle of like it's almost
it's that
DNA thing.
It's hard to define, but there's that author's voice. We talked about it one of the shows here. I don't think it's aired yet. By the time this one does, it will. But it's so hard to define what that is versus style versus the next thing, right? But
Well,
there's that part that is there's just the ability to think and to see the world and to see that world and think and the characters and then fit that into a story.
Yeah.
Is alchemy. I mean, it is kind of you can have techniques and you can teach those techniques. But some people are going to be better at them than others, right? Steph Curry's going to shoot 3-pointers better than other people.
Yeah. Like you can
teach him how he does it.
You can teach them to a level. You can put me in a basketball gym and say, hold the ball like this. And, we can do some workouts but then there's like another level, so it's like you get to a certain level and you kind of have to take it from there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you had brought up J.K. Rowling, and that's what she did. She created this world that joined a separate piece, right? The boys' school, or the kids' school, and then this magical world, created the damaged characters, created the quest, put all of this together in a very engaging way. She created this whole new genre. Tom Clancy created the whole new genre of the techno thriller back in the 80s. Dan Brown created a whole new genre with the Da Vinci Code. So the people who envision a new world, you have to be a competent writer. You don't have to be a brilliant writer. You have to be a brilliant plotter, and you have to see the world in a unique way.
Yeah. Yeah, the unique way, exactly. And you have to be a kind of super creative, right? To kind of push these entirely new boundaries and not be scared to sit down and write that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a great way to think it. Like seeing the world in a unique way is probably not something you're going to teach anyone.
That's honestly the skill.
That's what you're not teaching.
That's what I see.
You can teach competency to get Dan Brown or J.K. Rowling's, like to get. Oh, no, there's a fly buzzing around me. The competent, to be a competent enough writer to do it. But you're not the unique way to see the world. That unique idea, the fusion. That's not something you're teaching. So. Awesome. So I know, Matt, we're running against it because you have students. Anything before we any parting words anyone like to express before we head off for the night?
I just had a great time. It was really great to spend time with you. Great to meet you, John. I'm honored
to meet you too.
Yeah.
This is a great thing you got going. This is a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
Awesome.
Thank you for doing this, Bill.
For sure that will stay in the show, because anytime people they say nice things about the show, 100% it stays, and that will be a little short. I'll share good. On social media.
We could do one episode where all the questions just are compliments and like we just discuss you. You want?
Very good, very good. I like that idea. So awesome! Thanks so much, guys, for joining in. I appreciate you both, and have a great night.
Thank you. Bye, John. Bye, Bill.
Take care.
Extra shots. Question for the audience. What do you think? Can great writing be taught? Can you be taught to a journeyman level? Can you just grow your skills to be as great as Shakespeare or whoever you put on your Mount Rushmore? Let us know in the comment section. I read all of them. Any comments you send me, I will personally get back to you on. And I will forward them obnoxiously to any one of the guests until they reply, because that's the type of guy I am. And thanks so much. So the whole show is a labor of fun. So if you enjoy this, you enjoy the show, none of us get paid. I am definitely the unpaid bartender working for tips, completely non-transactional, all to give back to the community. So if you do want to support us, very best way to do that really is to pick up a book. So if you would be inclined, I know John's last book, Harm's Way, had great reviews. One of the ones I really loved was that it was blending breathtaking action with deep emotion. And I think you got to see that in the conversations, that he really cares about the characters. So he's writing a thriller, he's writing commercial fiction. He wants things to sell, which is perfectly okay. I know sometimes I have to tell myself that. So other writers out there, it's perfectly okay to sell things that people want. But it's really brilliant too. He's a great guy. Comes on. If you're interested, definitely pick up. He's a great, phenomenal writer. So you will not be disappointed. And Matt, I hosted the book launch for his latest collection, Forest for the Trees, which is really brilliant. And again, you really get to experience the people here. So all of that stuff about compassion, finding the empathizing with characters that maybe seem flawed or maybe seem like they're doing something wrong and maybe are flawed and maybe are doing something wrong, you really find it in that collection. So A Forest for the Trees would be a great pickup. And if you are interested, I certainly work very hard at this. So if you are interested, I have you love short stories, going back to Matt's Without Expiration, which is over there. I also have the anthology of Christmas stories, A Fire for Christmas, which is satirical. You'll get the personality you see here quite a bit. Without Expiration is also a lot of fear and trauma-based inspiration on that one, going back to the inspiration topic. So thanks again. If you like the videos, you like what we're doing, please leave me a comment. I really love, getting back to them. And if there is other topics you'd like to get to, please let me know. I would love to not invent them on my own, and have guests belittle me for them. So if there is anything you'd love to cover, please let me know. We would love to get to them. We have so much of these lined up with so many great writers, starting off, acclaimed, bestsellers, every portion of it. It's been a great 2 years, and we're going to keep it going. So thanks so much for tuning in. And you guys, I was going to cheers you with a drink, but I finished mine. So thanks so much for tuning in, and cheers, everybody.